Sean Diddy Combs is what's trending in true crime.
Sean Combs now claiming to spy on him in his jail cell.
Combs did not do this all on his own.
Sean Diddy Combs was expected to appear in court within the hour, but postponed just moments ago.
Diddy and his lawyers knew was coming down the pike eventually.
An unnamed person has accused the music mogul of and assaulting him.
Their investigation into Sean Combs is ongoing, and now they say they've uncovered criminal conduct that does indeed span 2 decades.
You remember when Sean Combs and his legal team were trying to get copies of those alleged tapes tied to his criminal case? The judge has finally made a decision on that, and it's a big one. This case has been surrounded by controversy, speculation, and intense legal battles, and now we have major updates.
Some new lawsuits accusing Sean Diddy Combs of assaulting 2 boys, one of them very young.
Sean Diddy Combs has been slammed with another lawsuit.
2 more victims, 2 more women that the feds are calling victims of Diddy and his criminal operation.
The judge overseeing Sean Combs' criminal case, Judge Aaron Subramanian from the Southern District of New York, has issued 2 key rulings that could have a major impact on the trial. These decisions center around a set of videos, widely known in the case as the freak-off tapes.
Sean Diddy Combs. His lawyers are claiming that videos of so-called freak-offs actually prove his innocence. Prosecutors received 9 videos of alleged parties.
Now, let's break it down. Earlier this month, Combs' attorneys filed a request asking the court to order prosecutors to turn over electronic copies of these tapes. Prosecutors claim these videos are key evidence in the charges that Combs is facing. The government alleges that Combs pressured individuals into participating in these activities and that he personally recorded these encounters. The defense, however, says these tapes prove his innocence.
Combs' defense team says that the tapes only show private activities between consenting. The prosecution argues those same videos prove that Combs coerced and women into activity.
Combs' legal team argued that under federal rules, they are entitled to inspect and copy electronic evidence that is in the government's possession if it is material to preparing their defense.
Electronic devices that they have to download and provide to me, but everything's on the government's timetable.
They claim that these videos are at the very center of the prosecution's case and are critical to proving Combs' innocence. In their request, the defense pointed out that the government had not provided a solid reason for withholding electronic copies. They also emphasized that these weren't classified documents or material requiring special security protocols. But here's where things get even more intense. Combs' lawyers stated that after reviewing the tapes, it was clear they actually proved his innocence.
He's innocent, and he's going to be able to show it.
Innocent means he didn't do any of the wrong things. Not guilty means they can't make the case.
He's
right?
innocent.
They said these videos did not show what prosecutors had alleged, but instead depicted private. They went as far as to say that the alleged victim in the case appeared to be a willing and enthusiastic participant.
The 8 people in the videos, the 8 celebrities in the videos, were allegedly victims of crimes.
They argued that the public narrative surrounding these tapes was misleading and that the prosecution had exaggerated the nature of what was happening in these videos. The defense also made a key point. They argued that since these videos were taken from the alleged victim's device rather than Combs' own possession, it weakened the government's claim that he had kept them as leverage or influence over the individuals involved.
Mr. Combs was in the tape, and this other person is, I would venture to say, more high profile than Mr. Combs.
Really?
The defense team emphasized that their client was being misrepresented in the media. They stated that the descriptions given by the prosecution had fueled widespread speculation, leading to an unfair portrayal of the situation. They further highlighted that these videos were recorded with the full knowledge and consent of all parties involved and did not depict anything beyond private moments between adults.
Surreptitious cameras that were recording in private places like bathrooms.
I didn't see the cameras. You could tell how the person was angled. I knew that it was a camera there because I was there. You know, I was there. I don't know if the person was too tall, he was holding it, or whatever.
Additionally, they pointed out that the prosecution's claims were largely based on speculation and that the actual footage contradicted many of the allegations. They argued that the case was being unfairly sensationalized and that their client was being treated unjustly in the public eye. To To bolster their position, the defense brought up legal precedents, where similar evidence was made available to the defense teams in past cases. They highlighted how proper legal procedure dictated that material evidence be shared equitably between the prosecution and the defense to ensure a fair trial. They argued that withholding these videos from them not only hindered their ability to prepare an adequate defense, but also violated the principles of due process. The defense also noted that by not granting them direct access to the videos, the prosecution was preventing them from fully analyzing the footage. They claimed that reviewing copies under restrictive conditions would not allow them to effectively challenge the prosecution's assertions or conduct their own forensic analysis. They wanted the ability to scrutinize every aspect of the footage in a controlled setting rather than having limited viewing access. Now, the judge had to weigh in on this battle, and yesterday he issued his decision. Judge Aaron Subramanian denied the defense's request to amend the protective order and obtain electronic copies of the videos. However, he left the door open for this issue to be revisited later. In his order, the judge explained that while the government refused to turn over the videos, they had provided multiple options for the defense to review and analyze them. The judge essentially told the defense that they needed to try harder to work out an arrangement with prosecutors before bringing the issue to the court. So, as of now, Combs and his team do not get the tapes. The defense will have access to view them under controlled conditions, but they will not have their own copies. This raises another important question. Why would the judge refuse to let Combs' legal team have direct access? Well, remember that Combs was already denied bail again. One of the reasons? Prosecutors accused him of violating prison rules, using other inmates' phone access, and allegedly trying to contact witnesses while in custody. Given these accusations, it's understandable why the court might be hesitant to hand over sensitive evidence directly to him. The government has been adamant about keeping strict control over these materials, citing the potential risks of leaks or misuse. Given the high-profile nature of the case and the intense media scrutiny surrounding it, any unauthorized disclosure could create significant complications. The court appears to be erring on the side of caution, ensuring that any access to these tapes is handled with stringent security measures. But that's not the only major ruling that just came down. The judge also had to address accusations from prosecutors that Combs' legal team violated the protective order by sharing too much information about these tapes. The prosecution argued that in a publicly filed letter, the defense revealed way too much about the content of these videos. Even though some portions were redacted, prosecutors claimed that key details were still made public, which went against the protective order. The government insisted that the protective order was in place to prevent unauthorized disclosures that could impact the trial, influence public perception, or compromise the privacy of individuals involved. They pushed the court to remove the document from public record entirely and refile it with additional redactions to protect sensitive details. Their position was that the defense had overstepped its boundaries by including descriptions of the tapes that should have remained private. According to the government, these disclosures could shape public opinion, making it harder to ensure an impartial jury. The defense, however, did not back down. They fired back, arguing that they had acted within their legal rights and that the government was overreaching with its demands. They acknowledged that they were willing to make redactions, but insisted that the prosecution was attempting to suppress critical information that could impact how the case is perceived. One of the defense's central arguments was that the government itself had already made public statements about these tapes, describing them as elaborate and orchestrated events. The defense pointed out that the prosecution had openly discussed aspects of the case during press conferences, providing the public with a version of events that painted Combs in a negative light. If the government had the ability to shape the narrative through these public disclosures, why should the defense be restricted from providing their own interpretation of the evidence? They also highlighted the fact that the government had previously mentioned the seizure of a large quantity of related materials, using it as a talking point in their allegations. The defense contended that the prosecution was selectively choosing what information to reveal while attempting to silence any counter-arguments that might challenge their claims. In their view, this created an unfair advantage for the prosecution, allowing them to control the flow of information without giving the defense the same opportunity. A major concern raised by the defense was the broader issue of fairness and transparency in the judicial process. They emphasized that criminal proceedings should not be conducted in a manner that allows one side to dictate the public perception of the case. The defense argued that sealing too much information could lead to a situation where the public and the court were only hearing one side of the story, rather than being presented with a balanced view of the evidence. Furthermore, they pointed out that the prosecution's stance on protecting privacy seemed inconsistent. While they had expressed concerns about ensuring the privacy of individuals involved, they had also made sweeping public statements about the nature of the evidence. The defense claimed that if privacy was truly the primary concern, then the government should have been more cautious in its own handling of disclosures. Another significant issue raised by the defense was the legal precedent regarding access to case materials. They cited examples from past cases where defendants had been granted broader access to evidence under similar circumstances. According to them, restricting access to these videos in such a strict manner set a dangerous precedent, potentially making it harder for defendants in future cases to obtain the evidence they need to build their defense. They also stressed that without adequate access to the tapes, they were at a disadvantage when preparing for trial. While the prosecution could analyze the footage freely, the defense was being placed in a situation where they had to rely on limited supervised access. This, they argued, placed an unnecessary burden on their ability to develop counterarguments and effectively challenge the government's assertions. Despite these strong objections, the judge ultimately ruled in favor of the prosecution, stating that the defense had indeed violated the protective order by including descriptions of the tapes in public documents. However, he also acknowledged that some of the government's requested redactions may have been too broad. Recognizing that transparency was still important, he allowed the defense to refile their letter with narrower redactions. This decision left both sides partially satisfied and partially frustrated. For the prosecution, the ruling meant that the defense's disclosures would be limited moving forward, ensuring that sensitive details were not made widely available. However, for the defense, the ruling also confirmed that not all of the prosecution's demands would be met, giving them some room to continue arguing for more transparency. What this means going forward is that the battle over access to evidence in this case is far from over. The defense may still push for additional access to the tapes, using the judge's allowance for revisiting the matter as an opportunity to renew their requests. At the same time, the prosecution is likely to remain firm in their stance, arguing that these materials must remain under strict controls to ensure the integrity of the case. The key takeaway from this latest legal development is that the trial is shaping up to be highly contentious, with both sides aggressively defending their positions. The prosecution wants to maintain control over sensitive materials, citing privacy and legal concerns, while the defense insists on broader access, arguing that fairness demands it. Now let's delve deeper into why these so-called freak-off tapes are such a pivotal element of this case. The prosecution's indictment outlines a disturbing narrative, alleging that Sean Combs and his associates manipulated and coerced individuals into participating in these so-called freak-off encounters under false pretenses. Prosecutors claim that these encounters were not spontaneous or isolated incidents, but were part of an orchestrated and ongoing pattern of behavior. The tapes, according to the prosecution, document these encounters in graphic detail, serving as evidence of both the coercion and the illegal nature of the acts. The indictment details that the events were often elaborate, lasting for several days and sometimes involved multiple participants. Victims, according to the prosecution, were subjected to controlled substances which were allegedly provided to keep them compliant. These claims suggest a power dynamic in which victims were not only manipulated into participating, but were also drugged to make them more susceptible to the actions taking place. The tapes, if presented as evidence, would provide a chilling and irrefutable account of these alleged crimes. It's crucial to note that these accusations aren't just a matter of isolated behavior, according to the prosecution. They argue that this was a repeated pattern of exploitation spanning several years. The indictment further asserts that even after Combs allegedly became aware of the federal investigation into these activities, he continued to engage in similar acts as recently as early 2018-2024. This claim implies that Combs' actions were not just historical, but ongoing, making the prosecution's case potentially stronger given the apparent continuity of the alleged behavior. In addition to these allegations, a recent Rolling Stone report adds another layer of complexity to the case. The report featured the testimony of an alleged male sex worker who claimed he was contacted by Combs in 2019 to participate in one of these so-called freak-offs. The individual described the encounters as ritualistic, claiming that Combs orchestrated and directed these activities, sometimes even watching from the shadows, adding an element of control and manipulation. The alleged victim also described being drugged during one of these events, aligning with the prosecution's assertions that drugs were used to maintain control over victims during these encounters. While the individual has not yet been confirmed as a potential witness in the trial, his testimony aligns closely with the prosecution's broader narrative. His claims of ritualistic control and coercion fit into the pattern that the prosecution is attempting to prove, that these weren't simply private consensual encounters, but were in fact part of a larger scheme involving exploitation and manipulation. If the prosecution can successfully present additional evidence, such as financial records, hotel bookings, and other corroborative testimonies, it could significantly strengthen their case. The presence of such records could help establish a clear timeline and provide context for the events in question, adding weight to the claim that these were not just casual encounters, but part of an orchestrated pattern of behavior. On the other hand, the defense is expected to vigorously argue that these encounters were entirely consensual. The defense will not shy away from the term freak-offs, but will instead embrace it, framing these encounters as private adult experiences that took place between consenting individuals. According to the defense, there was no coercion, no force, and no trafficking involved. In their view, these were simply personal encounters between adults, and any allegations of coercion or drug use are exaggerated or unfounded. To support this position, the defense is likely to present witnesses who contradict the prosecution's version of events. These witnesses will argue that the individuals involved in the encounters were not forced or manipulated into participating, but instead chose to engage voluntarily. The defense's strategy will likely focus on framing these encounters as part of a private, consensual lifestyle that was misconstrued or misinterpreted by those outside the situation. By presenting these counter-testimonies, the defense will attempt to create reasonable doubt in the minds of the jurors, suggesting that there is no criminality in what occurred and that these were private, adult activities that were entirely within the bounds of the law. This sets up a stark contrast between the two sides in this case. The prosecution's argument centers around manipulation, control, and illegal activity, while the defense insists that the encounters were consensual, private, and lawful. The question at the heart of the trial will be whether or not these encounters were truly consensual. If the defense can present enough compelling evidence to suggest that the acts were consensual and that there was no coercion, threats, or manipulation, they may be able to mount a strong defense. However, if the prosecution can successfully present evidence that these encounters involved illegal activity, whether through the use of drugs, coercion, or trafficking, then Combs could face severe consequences. The trial is set to begin in May, and as we approach that date, it is clear that both sides are preparing for a fierce legal battle. Recent rulings indicate that the prosecution is holding firm to its position, maintaining strict control over the evidence in the case, while the defense is fighting for greater access to key materials. One significant ruling in recent weeks is the judge's decision to uphold the protective order that restricts the defense's access to certain tapes and evidence. This means that the defense will not be able to obtain copies of the tapes for independent analysis, which could put them at a disadvantage if they cannot review this crucial evidence. Instead, the defense will have to rely on a limited viewing of the tapes under conditions set by the court. This ruling is significant because it prevents the defense from having full access to the material they believe is vital to their case. The judge's refusal to amend the protective order suggests that the court is prioritizing the integrity of the investigation and preventing any potential misuse or dissemination of sensitive materials. This ruling also underscores the importance of these tapes to the prosecution's case. With the defense having limited access, the prosecution retains control over how the evidence is presented, which could prove advantageous as they work to make their case. As for the rest of the evidence, there is still much to be revealed. The prosecution is expected to call several witnesses, including those who can testify about the coercion and drug use allegedly involved in these encounters. Financial records and hotel bookings will also be critical, as they could help establish the timeline of events and link Combs to the activities in question. If these records can be tied directly to Combs and his associates, they could provide powerful evidence supporting the prosecution's claims. With more information likely to come to light as the case progresses, we are still far from knowing how it will ultimately unfold. There could be more victims who come forward, and the prosecution may present additional evidence that has not yet been disclosed. On the other hand, the defense will undoubtedly continue to challenge the validity of the evidence and seek to discredit the prosecution's claims. As always, the key issue in this case will be whether or not the encounters were truly consensual, and the outcome will likely depend on the ability of each side to present compelling and convincing evidence. In conclusion, this case is shaping up to be one of the most high-profile legal battles in recent history. The stakes are high for Sean Combs, whose reputation and freedom are on the line. With both sides preparing for a long and contentious trial, the public will be watching closely to see how the evidence unfolds. Will the prosecution be able to prove that these freak-off tapes are evidence of illegal activity, or will the defense succeed in portraying them as consensual encounters between adults? As the trial date approaches, the tension continues to build and the outcome remains uncertain. Stay tuned for more updates as this case develops. Do you think the judge made the right call by refusing to amend the protective order? What do you think will happen next in this high-stakes trial? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more updates on this case as it progresses.